This is Samantha Owens, and Haley Clark and I will be facilitating the article by Gay and Kirkland titled Developing Cultural Critical Consciousness and Self-Reflection in Pre-Service Teacher Education. And while studying this chapter, I kept thinking back to my teacher preparation program for undergrad, and I tried to compare what my program was like to what the authors expressed as a missing yet highly important component of what should be taught to pre-service teachers to set them up to successfully navigate a culturally responsive classroom. Gay and Kirkland begin the article by talking about culturally responsive teaching as an appropriate outcome of teacher preparation programs. Culturally responsive teaching is using cultures, experiences, and perspectives of minority students to teach academic knowledge and skills. Gay and Kirkland explain the importance of culturally responsive teaching through three key points. A, multicultural education and educational equity are deeply interconnected. B, teacher accountability involves being more self-conscious, critical, and analytical of one's teaching beliefs and behaviors. And C, teachers need to develop deeper knowledge and consciousness about what is to be taught, how, and to whom. So teachers need to know who they are teaching and how to reach them in the most effective ways. This is a big reason why culturally responsive teaching must be taught in pre-service teacher education and in staff development. It can be hard and uncomfortable to take a critical look at yourself and to find areas of weakness. Self-reflection and cultural consciousness are not natural, thus making them difficult for teachers to participate in. Teachers need to have a thorough understanding of their own cultures and the cultures of different ethnic groups, as well as how this affects teaching and learning behaviors. Gay and Kirkland write that a good starting point is to acknowledge the obstacles holding you back from the process. The first obstacle we'll address is confusion surrounding the practice of self-reflection. I know when I was a pre-service teacher, we had to reflect on superficial things like how the lesson went and what we might change in the future. But I remember our reflections never really dealt with topics like multiculturalism. We were never expected to go really deep on our reflections, which rolls into the next obstacle of limited opportunities to practice self-reflection. While I mentioned that my past experience with reflecting as a pre-service teacher didn't really touch on race and diversity issues, I also lacked an influence, whether that was my university professors or my collaborating teacher, that really required me to reflect deeply and to make connections about whether my teaching was culturally responsive. It just didn't seem like the most important thing in my program while I was there. The next obstacle is believing that teaching is an objectifiable craft. Teaching is as much a personal performance, a moral endeavor, and a cultural script as it is a technical craft. In my program, there's definitely more focus on the technical craft of teaching, like making sure I had the rules and routines down, following the formula of a lesson plan. Definitely felt like I was following like a script a lot of the time. And when you're expected to follow a strict protocol, most pre-service teachers feel scared or uncomfortable deviating from it, even if they feel called to do it a different way, like modifying things to make it more multicultural. Um, Pre-service teachers are definitely all about surviving and making it through the beginning of their teaching career, so I feel like they would be a lot less likely to, deviate from what they've been told to do. Another common obstacle with pre-service teachers is diverting attention from the targeted topic, which means shifting the focus from race to other topics or just skirting the issue entirely. Gay and Kirkland give an example of this as teachers repeating statistics and trends about minority achievement that they may have read, why discrepancies exist, but not really looking critically at their own classrooms and coming up with solutions for their group of students or analyzing the underlying causes of achievement in these populations. They may divert the issue from race over to things like class, gender, or individuality. You'll also find some teachers simply choosing to stay silent. They may choose not to engage in conversations about multicultural education. Instead, they plead ignorance or lack of exposure. It definitely takes courage to address these issues because you're very likely to face others who are ignorant or find it all just a non-issue. Pre-service teachers are usually just trying to survive the beginning of their teaching careers, like I mentioned, and they're not really likely to rock the boat and be the ones to call for change. The last obstacle Gay and Kirkland mention is benevolent liberalism. which is characterized by feeling guilty about racism and past injustices and feeling committed to being part of the change, but they tend to fall short of actually making that happen. It's not enough to want to change it, though. You have to take the next step and actually do something. General knowledge about the situation needs to turn into specific instructional strategies. So now let's move into some solutions to overcoming resistance to cultural and critical consciousness and self-reflection. We should be creating learning expectations of criticalness and constantly self-reflecting. Think deeply and analytically and check yourself as a teacher. Have critical conversations with colleagues about race and cultural diversity in the classroom. You should also be modeling cultural consciousness in your own teaching. And for our students' sake and the sake of pre-service teachers who might be observing or working with us, you should lead by example and seek to embed multiculturalism into the curriculum and allow students to practice being culturally conscious themselves, which can look like putting on a short skit, writing poetry, or by leading a class discussion facilitated by the teacher. Let students learn by doing. So in conclusion, it is not enough to have courageous conversations, but something must be done and action must be taken. The need for cultural critical consciousness in pre-service teacher programs, as Gay and Kirkland said, quote, "This practice should involve concrete situations, guided assistance, and specific contexts and catalysts. Pre-service teachers and all teachers need to be able to practice being culturally aware and reflect on personal practices in the classroom." This graphic on the slide reflects different levels of reflection, and I feel like the smaller circle represents like a safe zone of reflecting. It's the level people are most comfortable operating at, but as the circle expands, the reflections get more in-depth and meaningful, leading up to critical reflection, which will make the most difference. So here are our questions to consider. Feel free to answer all of them or just one or two, it doesn't matter. The first one is to describe your pre-service teaching program. Do you feel like there was an appropriate emphasis on culturally responsive teaching and self-reflection? Question 2, which, if any, of the obstacles have you experienced as a teacher, or which ones have you seen from colleagues? And question number 3, reflect on your teaching practice. Is your classroom one where multicultural education is evident? If not, what can you do to change and grow in that area? What methods to overcome resistance to cultural critical consciousness would you benefit from the most? Thank you all for listening to our facilitation.